A gamble on the Indus. Pakistan cannot, however, afford to do so because time is not on Pakistan's side. In the long run, the most important thing about the people of Pakistan is not who they are or what kind of religion they follow, but that whoever they are, there are too many of them for the land in which they find themselves, and more of them all the time. In 2010, the population was estimated at between 180 and 200 million, making Pakistan the sixth largest country on the earth. In terms of population, it has risen from 131 million at the census of 1998, 34 million at the census of 1951, 4 years after the independence, and only 19 million on at British census of 1911. And is today 10 times what it was 100 years ago. Officially, population growth now stands at 2.2% a year, which would seem to be a serious underestimate. Pakistan's inability to bring this rate down more quickly reflects state weakness, social conservatism, lack of education, above all among women, and the ability of the religious parties to play on popular prejudices. Since Ayub Khan, in the late 1950s, no Pakistani government has dared to promote family planning seriously, and the reduction that has occurred has happened because of socio-economic change and urbanization, not through state action. The huge youth bulge making its way through the Pakistani population means that this population will continue to grow steeply for a long time to come. In 2008, 42% of the population was estimated as under the age of 14. If present trend continues, then by the middle of the 21st century, according to the World Bank projections, Pakistan may have as many as 335 million people. This is far too many people for Pakistan's available water resources to support, unless the efficiency of water use can be radically improved. If the old Indian economy used to be described as a gamble on the monsoon, then the entire Pakistani state can be described as a gamble on the Indus. And climate change means that over the next century, this may be a gamble against increasingly long odds. The capricious power of water in this area is demonstrated by the remains of numerous cities, starting with those of the Indus Valley civilization 4,000 years ago, that have been either abandoned because rivers have changed their course or been washed away by the floods, as so many towns and villages were by the great floods of 2010. At an average of 240 mm of rainfall per year, Pakistan is one of the most naturally arid of the world's heavily populated states. Without the Indus River system and the canals flowing from it, most even of Punjab would be semi-desert and scrub forest called jungle in Pakistan, as it was before the British began their great irrigation projects. This is apparent if you fly over the country once the 5 great rivers of Punjab and the Kabul River flowing from Afghanistan have paid their tribute to the Indus. The vast majority of cultivated land in the southern end of Punjab and whole of Sindh is only what can be irrigated from the Indus. Beyond these lands, all is brown, yellow and grey, dotted with occasional oases, provided by natural springs or more often tube wells. Only 24% of Pakistan's land area is cultivated, the great majority through man-made irrigation systems. The rest is pastoral land or uninhabited desert, semi-desert and mountain. Chronic overuse, however, means that many of the natural springs have dried up, and the water table is dropping so rapidly in many years that the tube wells will also eventually follow them into extinction. That will leave the Indus once again, and in the furor surrounding the debunking of the exaggerated claim that the glaciers feeding the Indus will disappear by 2035, it has been forgotten that they are nonetheless melting, and if they disappear a century or two later, the effects on Pakistan will be equally dire. If no serious action is taken in the meantime radically to improve Pakistan's conservation and effective use of water. If the floods of 2010 are a harbinger of a long-term pattern of increased monsoon rains, this, on the other hand, would potentially be of great benefit to Pakistan, but only potentially, because to harness them for agriculture requires both a vastly improved storage and distribution infrastructure and radical measures to stop deforestation in the mountains and to replant deforested areas. Otherwise, increased rainfall will risk more catastrophes like that of 2010, with the water rushing off the deforested hillsides in the north to swamp first the valleys and then the plains. It should be added, though, that an absolutely essential part of existing infrastructure did work during the floods. the great barrages along the Indus and its tributaries. If these had broken, several of Pakistan's great cities would have been inundated, and the death toll would have been vastly higher than 1900 who lost their lives. This dependence on the Indus is a great source of long-term danger to Pakistan. Over the next century, the possible long-term combination of climate change, acute water shortages, poor water infrastructure, and steep population growth has the potential to wreck Pakistan as an organized state and society. Long-term international aid projects in Pakistan should be devoted above all to reducing this mortal threat by promoting reforestation, repairing irrigation systems, and even more importantly, improving the efficiency of water use. Human beings can survive for centuries without democracy, and even without such security, they cannot live for more than 3 days without water. This extent of the water crisis that is already occurring will be described in the chapters on Sindh and Balochistan. As two of the authors of World Bank's very worrying 2004 report on Pakistan's water situation write, the facts are stark. Pakistan is already one of the most water-stressed countries in the world, a situation that is going to degrade into outright water scarcity due to high population growth. There is no feasible intervention which would enable Pakistan to mobilize appreciably more water than now it uses. There are no additional water resources to be exploited, and agricultural water use must decline to enable adequate flows into the degrading Indus River Delta. Pakistan's dependence on a single river system makes its water economy highly risky. Groundwater is now becoming overexploited in many areas, and its quality is declining. There is little evidence that the government or donors, including the World Bank, have re-engineered the capacity and funding to deal with this great challenge, and here delay is fatal because the longer it takes to develop such actions, the greater will become the depth beneath the earth of the water table. According to a 2009 study by Woodrow Wilson Center, drawing on a range of different works, by 2025, population growth is likely to mean that Pakistan's annual water demand rises to 338 billion cubic meters, until Pakistan's water availability will be around the same as at present, at 236 billion cubic meters. This resulting shortfall of 100 billion cubic meters would be 2/3 of the entire present flow of the Indus. And this frightening situation would have come about even before the potential effects of climate change begin to kick in. These effects could be to turn stress into catastrophe by the end of the 21st century. Well, before Pakistan reaches this point, however, it is likely conflict over access to shrinking Indus will have raised tensions between Pakistan's provinces to levels which will be incompatible with the country's survival. If anyone thinks that the condition of Pakistan will be of little consequence to the rest of the world in the long run, they should remember that 100 years from now, if it survives that long, Pakistan will still possess nuclear weapons, one of the biggest armies in the world, one of the biggest populations in the world, and one of the biggest diasporas in the world, especially in Britain. Islamic radicalism, which has already existed for hundreds of years, will also be present, even if it has been considerably reduced by the West's withdrawal from Afghanistan. All of this will still mean that out of all countries in the world that are acutely threatened by climate change, Pakistan will be one of the most important. Moreover, what happens to Pakistan will have a crucial effect on the rest of South Asia, where around 1/5 of the world's entire population live and will live. Those Indians who would be tempted to rejoice in Pakistan's fall should therefore consider it would almost certainly drag India down with it. The World Bank has valuable programs in place on which much more could be built. For example, at present, Pakistan harvests a good deal less of its rainfall than neighboring areas of India, and only a fraction of China's harvest per cubic meter of rainfall. Intensive effort is needed to improve this performance, something which does not require expensive high-tech solutions, but rather a mixture of spade work and better, more innovative management. Concentrating development aid on the improvement of Pakistan's water infrastructure has the added advantage that such improvement is highly labor-intensive and provides a range of jobs from masses of ordinary workers with spades to highly trained engineers. This means that benefits from international aid will flow immediately to many ordinary people and be immediately apparent to them. By contrast, most US aid in recent decades, though often very useful to the economy as a whole, has not been visible to ordinary people and therefore has had no political effects in terms of attitudes to the US.